Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking wintertime crankbaits, some of my favorite hard baits for wintertime fishing. And as you can hear, I got a little bit of a cold from Thanksgiving week. Of course, everybody flying in, so forgive my kind of rough voice today. But yeah, we're getting into that time period. I think it was like 22 degrees this morning or last night. And so the water temps are going to start really getting down there. This is the time period where I start considering the season to be wintertime. And crankbaits, frankly, since I moved to Tennessee especially, have become my favorite category of bait. Now, I would say jerk baits are right there, right up there. But jerkbaits are also kind of, exhausting to fish all day. Crankbaits, on the other hand, especially the type of crankbaits that we fish during the wintertime, or at least I like to fish during the wintertime, pretty easy to fish. They're easy to fish with thick gloves on. And they also imitate both shad and crawfish, which crawfish becomes a really important forage species during the wintertime. And I'm talking anywhere from December through to early March. That's kind of, for a lot of the country, that's still kind of a wintertime period. So anyways, crankbaits are awesome, and I wanted to show you guys some of my absolute favorites. And really, they're kind of split into two different groups. You've got the lipless crankbait, okay, so something like this right here. All right, lipless crankbait, no lip on it, obviously, just shaped so that you get that tight wiggle from just the flatness on the top. And then you also have a traditional build crankbait. And most of my build crankbaits that I'm going to be throwing are, kind of the medium to small size, all right? And they're also kind of that moderate depth range. That's kind of what I like to fish this time of year, something that gets into that 6 to 10 foot range. Those crankbaits seem to do the absolute best, most of the damage for sure. So let's actually start with these lipped crankbaits that I like to throw this time of year. Really, for me, it's all about imitating the crawfish. Once it really starts getting cold, December's kind of like one of those months where the fish are still really focused on shad, and they will be throughout the month of December. So I'm not saying like right now you have to switch over to crawfish, because a lot of the fish, frankly, are still out there just kind of meandering around, and you can catch them on forward-facing sonar with the minnow type baits and stuff like that. You could do that all throughout winter. But once you start getting into like January and February especially, those months, you can really start catching a lot of good fish on a medium diving crankbait. You could do it in December too, but generally, I'm kind of waiting until November or January and February to start really tying a bunch of these on. So my favorites would be any type of crankbait that has a really it does really good just cranking against rock, because a lot of the time, this time of year during the winter time, obviously that's where the crawfish are going to be. They're going to be around the rocks, whether it's shale, whether it's chunk rock, whatever type of rock it is. You got to kind of experiment, because the fish are on different lakes are going to hold on different types of rock and different types of banks and transitions and things like that. But I like to use these crankbaits that do very well in that type of situation. And a crankbait that is really good is a wiggle wart style bait. I'm going to actually make its own category. So a wiggle wart style bait actually has a pretty, a pretty aggressive wobble compared to some of my other choices during the wintertime. It's a little bit wider, but the one thing it does really well is it has a great hunting action, especially when you're making contact with rocks. And so this bait right here is actually the Spro rock crawler, and this is actually probably my favorite. Honestly, I've even got some like old wiggle warts here in this box. I actually had a client in Alaska, or not one of my clients, but my boss's client at the lodge that I work at in Alaska. We were just talking one day, probably out salmon fishing, and he told me he had an old tackle box full of crankbaits. And I was like, do you have any wiggle warts? I didn't even think he knew what a wiggle wart was. And turns out he did have a lot of wiggle warts. And when I got home, I had a box waiting for me full of old wiggle warts. So this is one of those suckers. I haven't even changed out the hooks on it. This hasn't even been in the water. But the old wiggle wart for sure. If you've got some, it's kind of a toss-up. They catch a ton of fish, but they're also super valuable, so you don't want to lose them. But man, are they effective. The pre-Rapala wiggle warts are known to be a much bigger fish catcher than the post-Rapala wiggle warts, for a lot of different reasons. I'm not as into that, buying expensive old baits and things like that. So I'm not too into that whole deal, but I do know that they have a different action and a different sound to them. But anyways, this style of crankbait, both the wiggle wart and the rock crawler, are one of my absolute favorite crankbaits to throw this time of year. And really, the crazy thing about this category of bait, this type of bait right here, especially the rock crawler, I just love the paint schemes on the rock crawler, and it really just hunts around on the bottom. It's a really, really good bait. And I use all the different sizes and all that, just depending on the conditions. But I've caught a ton of fish in ultra clear water on places like South Holston Reservoir up in northern Tennessee here, northeast Tennessee. And I've also caught them in pretty dingy water, during periods of rain on places like Table Rock. So you can catch them in dirty water and also catch them in real clear water, just because they do put off a little bit of sound, but they've got a real erratic action that really just pushes a lot of water, and the size of the bait pushes a lot of water. So anyways, love a wiggle wart style bait. Another crankbait that I've just fallen in love with this time of year is a DT6. Okay, a DT6 is so good in a lot of the same situations, but I feel like the coldest days, when the fish are at their most sluggish, that's when I like to throw the DT6. And this one, as the name implies, only really dives down to 6 feet. You can get it maybe a little bit deeper, but that's another thing, is if I'm really trying to keep it in that kind of 6 foot range or less, the DT6 kind of plays a big role. But this one has a tighter wobble to it, and just to me, I think it really does well on those real cold, high pressure days, versus the wiggle wart, which it'll work in those high pressure days too, but I really feel like it's better suited for when the fish are a little bit more active during the winter time. So those are really my two favorite types of crankbaits. Of course, shad wraps are really big. I'll be honest, there are certain categories of baits that when I say that I've hardly ever caught fish on them, people are like, what? You've been fishing for this long and I just haven't got into throwing a shad wrap that much, but I know a shad wrap is in this category where you should be throwing it this time of year. I've always thrown these type of crankbaits and done very well. So I'm a kind of guy that likes to keep it simple. But I do know that shad wraps this time of year, really big, deal, during the winter time. All right. Working through this cold head that I've got going on. All right, moving on. Let's go to the lipless crankbaits. So lipless crankbaits are honestly, I kind of break my boxes into two separate boxes. We've got one that is all shad color, so both opaque and shiny finishes, shad coloration. And I will throw a shad pattern during this time of year, like December. But once we get into January and February, especially out here on Lake Chickamauga and things like that, that's when I kind of make a switch over to the reds, the crawfish colors, things like that. Depending on the fishery, there's some fisheries that maybe, you want more of a earthy tone, you know, crawfish imitation. But for the most part, down here in the South, red seems to play a big role. And here we go. So the crazy thing about lipless crankbaits, like lipped crankbaits, I'm very specific as far as the brand and the model of crankbait that I like to throw. I've tried a lot of them, and I really just kind of narrow it down to a handful that I really like. But with lipless crankbaits, it really runs the gamut. I've got everything from, you know, this one's an Academy H2O series that actually works pretty good. This one's pretty unique because it's got a very slow fall to it, but we're not going to talk about it too much. It's pretty cool. But I also use a lot of the Booyah ones, like this one knockers. You can see here I've got this the hook taken off of this one. This is and I've got a big, you know, number 2 929 on there, or 930. This is actually a modification that I do if I'm fishing a lake that has a ton of grass. I'll actually take the back hook off and put a big front hook on there, and it works great. It tangles a lot less, and so that's a little bonus secret for you in this video. Try that if you're fishing a lake, like, you know, down in Florida or like Toho or something, or you're out on Sam Rayburn, you know, a lake where you're fishing these large grass flats. Try that tip. But I fish, you know, I love the Strike King red eye shad. I don't particularly like the finishes on them as much as some of the other. I mean, there's some great colors. I'm not saying anything about the colors, but the finishes, you know, aren't as durable sometimes, especially the shiny finishes. But I love the fall that the red eye shad has. It has that kind of wiggle fall. So like if I'm fishing when I want to yo-yo more or stop and go retrieve, that's when I like to fish the you know, red eye shad. You know, I'll do the same thing with all these baits, but I feel like that shimmy on the way down really does get a lot of bites. There's a lot of good, I mean, 6 Sense has been one that I've started to add to my arsenal here. And I'm going to have all of these in the description below. So if you're interested in buying any of these, you can use those affiliate links. I should have probably taken these and untangled them before I started this video. There we go. 6 Sense makes some really cool colors, and the crankbaits run really well. So I have been using a lot of these lately. But in general, the great thing about lipless crankbaits is that every single one is going to be just a little bit different, but they all pretty much run well, you know. Now, whether or not they fall well, that's a different story. Like, I don't particularly care for the traditional rattle trap and how it falls compared to some of the other ones. I feel like it falls pretty wonky. So like these right here, original rattle traps, they make a lot of really good noise. Okay, these are proven crankbaits, got a great action, but they're more of crankbaits that I like to cast and reel back and add a little bit of, you know, a rod tip action or you know, reel movement, you know, to these baits, you know. But it's not one that I like to yo-yo as much. I know some guys love to yo-yo a traditional rattle trap. I'm just not one of those guys because it just seems to have a pretty you know, pretty wonky fall. You know, it kind of rolls on its side and just has a weird fall to it. But anyways, but all in all, the great thing about lipless crankbaits is you can really, I'm always, you know, experimenting with lipless crankbaits. Like, I'm changing one, going to another. I feel like it's one of the categories of baits you can really fine tune based on making changes in the crankbaits that seemingly look about the same design, but they have something very, very different, from the different sound to the different wobble to the different ways that they fall. All of them kind of do something different. But those are some of my favorites. But I probably got 10 maybe a dozen different brands in this box here, and who knows how many different models. So anyways, guys, just want to show you some of my favorite crankbaits. If you're looking to get out there and you're not particularly into the whole forward-facing sonar thing during the wintertime, definitely get you some of these crankbaits that I talked about today, and make sure that you change out the hooks to some high-quality treble hooks, especially this time of year. You're banging them against rocks. Those hooks are going to dull very, very quickly, and the fish's mouths are just a little bit tougher this time of year. They seem to be a little bit more tough to penetrate than during other parts of the year, warmer parts of the year. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Again, make sure you like, share, subscribe. If you're looking for another way to support this channel, I'm going to have a link in the description below for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Obviously, they are near and dear to our heart, so make sure you check them out and donate if possible. It's that time of year where maybe you want to get a little tax deduction or something like that, and you want to help out a great organization. I can't think of a better one. So anyways, guys, make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out on the water. Make sure you trust the process.